This is Zettelcast, brought to you by readers, writers, thinkers, and teachers from Lilypub, along with our partners in thought, our Zettelkastens. In this show, we share discoveries that our Zettelkastens have shown us.
There you go.
And compare notes on how we're using this marvelous invention in our creative work. Thank you for joining us.
All right, Brooke, do it again.
All right.
Episode 12, Clubbing with our plus ones. All right. So, welcome to episode 12 of the Zettelcast. This is a weekly get-together of friends from lilypub.org, holding up the sign that Kathleen always has available, lilypub.org, where our Zettelkastens are our plus ones. So today we are going to talk more about fiction, and not just the fiction that we're writing, which we've talked about a lot in the previous episodes, but fiction that we read and what, if anything, a Zettelkasten brings to that experience of reading. So I'm going to be asking a lot of questions rather than making a lot of statements in this one, because I bet I have, if we were to total up how many books of fiction we've all read in our lives, my pile would be kind of small. As much as I have enjoyed it, I've just been very, very nonfiction-y for decades. But, I know there's this thing called book clubs that people are part of. I've never been part of one. I've been part of discussions of, we should have a book club, and it never does happen. But, among you, how many of you have been involved in book clubs currently or in the past? Victoria's yes?
Yeah.
Yep. Everybody. Okay, cool. So how do you think a Zettelkasten might change that experience for you or enrich it in any way?
For one, I think people would have a better grasp of what they've read and what they're sharing. I mean, I know a lot of times I would be participating in a group and you get there and you can't remember what you read last week. So it would certainly help with that.
Just because of the discipline of taking notes with a bib card?
Yeah. And I think it forces you to go deeper into the material. At least that's what I found.
So even though, I'm just going to stay with that a little bit, Victoria. So you've been a writer for your entire life,
Ever.
right? Have you always read fiction with a kind of an eye toward how is this constructed, going along with it? Or is that something that happens in retrospect? Or does it depend on the book?
I would say I probably always approached fiction with kind of a scalpel, just because I'm naturally curious about how stories are put together. And I read widely across genres when I was young, like middle school into high school into college. I didn't read so much in college because obviously it was school stuff, but I had a lot of fiction writing classes in college. So even then, it was about looking at the whole and then taking it apart into its component pieces and seeing why they worked or why they didn't. I was always fascinated with that. And I don't think I realized that until later when I had my kids and I was reading young reader stories with them. And I would be thinking to myself, man, this is not working. So I think I've just always approached it that way.
Interesting. All right. Other people who've been part of book clubs and reading and Zettelkasten, who wants to go?
There was always a problem with the book clubs that I belong to, in that I'm not sure if Victoria just said this or not, but everybody didn't keep up with the reading. the assignments. So it generally boiled down to a couple of three people who carried the show, and everybody else just kind of rode along, contributing comments here and there, but basically the backbone was put together or held together. The entire thing was held together by two or three, maybe four people. And that was an issue. But with the Zettelkasten, that might be offset by having to do notes, but not necessarily. Who says?
You must submit your notes.
Yeah, that you have to do, that you've done it, that you've actually done it, taken the bib notes, made your bib cards. Who says? So that's the same sort of discipline. So if you are not, committed in your heart, then there it is. There it is.
I was looking online for how to run a book club, and you can find thousands of pages of advice about how to do that because a lot of people try it. And one of the things that I thought was interesting is you need to have a sense of the vibe that the people in the group are looking for. If they're really, sometimes they're just looking for friends. And the book is kind of an incidental excuse to gather, which is totally fine if that's what's wanted. But if you've got a mix of people who are there to be enriched, they want to seek other people who want that rather than find themselves in people who are just going to go off on tangents and chat. And it reminds me of Bartle's player types that we discussed. I think it was last week. Some people are who play games want to win, want to score the points. Some people want to explore the entire world. Some people want to socialize, and some people want to cause havoc. I think we see this in probably a lot of these collaborative things as well. Cool. So has reading fiction with Zettelkasten changed your experience, Deb?
It has. It has changed my experience, but I have to admit I didn't do any bib cards. I've been reading The Starless Sea and listening to it as well, thoroughly enjoying it and not wanting to stop actually and write down anything. I just wanted to, to keep going, to keep seeing those images that she painted in my head. And to enjoy the flow of what was happening. And even though I had questions like, why does she always refer to him, the protagonist, by all three of his names? Why is that? Why does she say things like, so and so and so, da 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 da, so and so said, da 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 da, so and so said. Why is she is a master writer. I know this. So there has to be a reason that she's doing this, but I haven't discovered what that might be yet. And I realized that I should be writing at least those questions down, but it's not likely that I'm going to forget, but that's not the point. The idea is to keep a trail of questions as you go through so that you have a reference. And that's basically what the Zettelkasten is there for, to hold your questions and make connections for you or help you make connections, etc. So that's where I am. It's like stories within stories within stories in this book.
Yeah.
It's it's amazing. And I was thinking about the difference between the outsider, right, and this story, the simplicity versus the complexity. And I was thinking, I guess somewhere inside me, I was hoping that somebody would take the reins, and I've said, but why didn't you ask somebody? But I didn't do that yet. But somebody would take the reins and actually go through the 28 character traits, analyzing at least the protagonist in each one of these stories, so that we could compare and see that one was on one, as Victoria pointed out, Saturday, I think. One is straightforward, and the other one is complex. But both, you can analyze, of course, both of them are subject to analysis, to character analysis. But I thought if I saw somebody do that, go through the exercise of analyzing it using the 28 character traits, I could catch the wind, in my sails, and and be chugging along. Because as I've said before, despite having created that chart, I still don't have it. I don't have the character traits. They're not my second skin or anywhere near that at this point. So I'm saying I should have asked, but it sounds like a big ask to ask somebody, to say to somebody, hey, do this. So
Well, if it helps, I'm chewing on that. But
you chewing on it?
whenever I've been in a book group, I've always had a reader's journal. So this is where my questions are going. I'm doing a straight read through. And once I finish that read through, then I'll go back and I'll do a proper Zettelkasten treatment and do the character traits for Starless Sea. But for me, I need to read all the way through it first, because it's nonlinear. So it's coming.
I'm waiting. I'm looking forward to it. I really am. So thank you for that. Yeah.
So I just want to put a little bit of context here around for people who might be watching this. What are we talking about? So Deb proposed this wonderful idea. Let's have a book club where we all together analyze the character traits through the lens of a couple of books, with the goal, as Deb put it so poetically, as she is wont to do, where it becomes a second skin, the familiarity with Kathleen's model of character trait development. And right now we're all at the starting gate, looking for somebody to lead us.
Coming.
Yeah. But it's a great, people who want to join lilypub.org and get in on this, it's a perfect time to do it, because you won't have missed anything. It's still the ground floor. And I think it's going to be, it has every chance of being a dynamite way to not only enjoy books, but to look at what do we mean when we say a story is character driven? What does that mean? How does the character's hand look on the
I made over
on the
6
wheel?
figures trading without even looking at the charts, without spending hours glued to the screen, and without
What is
relying
that?
on someone else to give me an alert.
Somebody's got a YouTube thing. Is it me? No. So Mel, your turn.
Yeah. Well, I am like you in a way that I don't read as much fiction as I do nonfiction. It's probably most of the time overall, probably more like 75% nonfiction, 25% fiction. And I, up until recently, rarely took any notes on fiction, because fiction is experiential. So even now that I'm starting to take notes, I still, the first read through, just experience it, don't take notes. I do, when I remember, set up a bib card and just to use as a bookmark. And if I run across something that's just so beautifully written that it stops me, I'll write that down. And if I come up with a burning question, I might write that down too. But that's what my bib cards look like, is just maybe a few quotes or questions, if at all. And then afterwards, I write, or I have been learning to write sort of a book review of my immediate reactions, what I liked, what I didn't like, what it reminded me of, that sort of thing. I really only started doing that this summer. I did that over several books. I read like 3 fiction books in a row when I was on vacation, so which was unusual. So all of those got that sort of treatment, but I completely forgot to do anything like that for the books that we've been doing for the discussion. So Starless Sea, I went right through, didn't even make a card for it. Same thing with The Outsiders. So I'm sort of belatedly making those cards now. So also, I like to write down ideas. And I don't really understand, or as Deb puts it, has a second skin of analyzing plot and character and things like that. So the one fiction book that I have that I made a main card off of, it was, yes, fiction, but it was written by a philosophy professor. So it was thinly disguised philosophy in the form of fiction. So no surprise there. So I'm sure that as I start to get the character traits and the plot points, and when Victoria's book comes out and I get that, then there will probably be some places in my Zettelkasten where those sorts of fiction analysis cards can grow up and develop. But right now it doesn't exist.
Would it, so has it, did you read any of these books that you talked about in the course of being part of a book club?
The ones over the summer?
Mhm.
No, those are all just on my own. I've only really been in a book club once, a long time ago, like almost 20 years. Um, and and that was Dan Brown. What was it? The Da Vinci Code, which is, sort of the caliber of books that most book clubs seem to go for. And I haven't really joined any since then, because usually when they say this is what we're reading, I'm like, it's not really what I want to read. I'm not interested. It's hard enough to find readers who want to join together to form a book club, and then when you say, well, they've got to be really nerdy readers who like the sort of things that I like, then there's just not enough of us in any one place. So I have not really been in a book club. As you all know, I sort of have a book club in my little forum where I suggest an old book to read each month. I haven't gotten the hang of running it and establishing a discussion. So definitely a lot to learn there.
I suspect that having meetings with a date is one of those things where it's like, I better not be one of those people who Deb talks about showing up having not read the book, haven't done the homework.
That's a good point.
Help.
So, so Victoria, in terms of book clubs in general, what would you, knowing who we have in Lily Pub and so on, how do you think that a book club could be run that, as you said, you're working on it, but what if you feel like sharing some of your preliminary thoughts would be great?
Well, I think definitely having a focus for what's our goal. So we know that our goal is to explore the character traits and look at how we can explore the story. So for my part, I'm about halfway through Starless Sea, so I'll finish that read as quick as I can, because my goal is to put together a reader's guide so that everyone has a way to navigate that story, because it is nonlinear. And then I was going to work with Kathleen and flesh out the character traits just for the main character. So I think you're right. You have to have someone kind of in the front who's sort of paving the way so that other people have a way to think about the material, because it's not native to most readers to look at it academically or pick it all apart.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a piece that I will be taking more of the lead on, in the coming month. Beyond that, I think, yeah, having a regular meeting time and a dedicated discussion topic that's always been part of the meat of the groups that I've participated in, is we know when we're going to be speaking and we know what we're going to talk about. So as you do that section of reading, you're looking for just that one thing, rather than like nobody knows what to discuss. So those are my first thoughts.
So is it necessary for the leader to have already read the book once through in order to formulate that plan, do you think?
I think when a group is young, yes, because it helps to have someone pave that way. As the group kind of coalesces and, we know that person's strong with plot, this person's strong with character, that person is more of a leisure reader, you kind of figure out where your pieces are. And then as you go forward, you need less of that leader, and each of you kind of picks up your piece. At least that's been my experience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Cool. I mean, I got to think that the Zettelkasten is really going to help us with this, help other people contribute to that structuring. When you've got a group of people in Lilypub who are all there in some shape, form, or another, getting involved with the Zettelkasten for their own purposes as writers or thinkers or so on. It feels like it has to pull us all into that kind of metacognition aspect of the reading. So this is the first time I'm reading. I'm still in the middle of the Starless Sea, and I created my bib card. And so we have two books in this club, and one of them is The Outsiders, and one is this. The Outsiders is more straightforward, but I just dove right into the Starless Sea, selfishly, because I felt like it looked like it was going to resonate with a lot of other things that I'm involved in, including Roanoke. And glad I've done it. But it is very interesting to have the bib card there and to have that experience of occasionally being taken out of the story and analyzing and putting a note in a card. Whereas I've never done that before, except for the kind of book that Mel is talking about, where it's somebody who's trying to teach you a lesson and they do it through a story, and sometimes that story is not very well told. But the it reminds me of when you listen to a piece of, like, a symphony. You don't want to be analyzing it the first time through. You want to just let it work on you. But there have been, in the course of reading this book, there have been things that just jump out at me. It's like, that is so cool. I love that. I have to note that. And so I've, not having gotten an education in reading literature, this is all rather new for me, and we're not doing it for the test.
Yeah, I think our first principle has to be to approach it by doing a read through first, which I probably should have said that in the beginning. Just read it. Highlight the things that catch your attention, that you like, that you don't like. Just keep that reader's journal or keep it on a note card, whatever. And then let's go back after we all have kind of our feet wet, and then let's give it the treatment.
Yeah. I looked in How to Read a Book, what Adler has to say about reading fiction. And he pretty much says the same thing. He said, before you analyze a work of fiction, you're not really entitled to your opinion about it until you've finished it. And you have to immerse yourself fully. You need to, he said, it's a different kind of active reading than what he proposes that you do for expository work, where your active reading is really about, essentially, do I agree with what the author is saying about this thing and does the argument hold together? And he said, this is not about argument. So it's really about the effect that the author is intending to have on you, and you need to be as open to all of the avenues of that effect as possible. And I will say that if I'm reading with an analytical mind, that is not open. That it's a different kind of curiosity. So I've been kind of sparing with these notes that I've been taking for my first run through, just the things that was like, oh, that's just irresistible. But then I'll get 50 pages along and I haven't written a note at all, and that's absolutely fine.
Yeah. So does anybody want to share their card? We have a question on the table.
About story or about the reading that we've been doing? Sure.
Either way, what I'm going to share is not specific to the Starless Seed, because what I'm going to share shows the entire process, and I thought that might have more value.
Oh yeah, let's go.
Can I just insert one something?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I've never met her, Jennifer Powell. But Beverly Wakefield wrote in the Writers Litigants Circle something I thought was just absolutely the most profound thing I've seen in a long time. And she said she's made it her mission to unteach children that fiction is fake. Okay. That's her mission. She's a librarian, I believe. And she said, here are my new definitions that I've started teaching today. Nonfiction equals learning through information, and fiction equals learning through imagination. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a real teacher to me.
Yes.
You know,
yeah.
A real teacher. So those children are very lucky to have her in their midst. And I'm just thinking that this is germane to what we're doing, you know, because bottom line, it's about learning, about expanding ourselves, taking in new stuff, churning it around, coming up with an innovation and producing it, putting it out into the world, you know? So hats off, Jennifer Powell. I hope she pops up soon. I haven't seen anything except that one. Oh yeah, she calls herself Ace_Librarian7.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm sorry, Victoria, go right ahead, please.
Well, I actually I want to respond to that, because one of the notes that I took from Adler on how to read fiction is to that same point. He says on page 200, we owe much to the expository literature, the philosophy, science, mathematics that has shaped the real world in which we live. But we could not live in this world if we were not able from time to time to get away from it. We do not mean that imaginative literature is always or essentially escapist. In the ordinary sense of that term, the idea is contemptible. If we must escape from reality, it should be to a deeper or greater reality. This is the reality of our inner life, of our own unique vision of the world. To discover this reality makes us happy. The experience is deeply satisfying to some part of ourselves we do not ordinarily touch.
Esther.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I would say I want to lump games in with that. You know, anything that really tries to use speculative fiction as a structure for an experience, even if it is a means of escape, that you don't dismiss it as a means of escape, because it can, if it touches you in that deeper level through imagination and even physical experience, that's profound stuff. It's art.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I've got to get that Adler book. Everyone keeps talking about Adler. I just need to get the book. I used to quote him heavily in debate, and I got completely away from Adler and Maslov and all the rest of them. So I need to revisit that block.
All right, Victoria,
All
help
right,
us.
let's do it. I'm gonna get rid of this video, and I'm gonna come over here. Okay, so what you're looking at is this, okay, that's not bad. So
Yeah, not bad at all.
the first thing that I did when I started working on turning fiction into a Zettelkastenable product is I laid out my categories because I knew I would be reading widely across different genres. So I went in and I made 6,000s is where my kind of random just stuff is. So I went 6510 through 6590. And I just lined out, speculative fantasy, romance, crime and mystery, and so on. So, and I know I am against over organizing, as we discussed before. But because I knew I would be moving quickly through a lot of work in order to write my book, I needed the organization. So I broke the rule, and it worked. So under 6510, which is my speculative fiction, I just gave it a .1, .2 through .5, and I divided them up into the kinds of books that I knew I would be reading again. So those things were already decided, and I didn't have to decide them in the moment. So then I had to make a decision about how things are used as I read them. So part of my addresses tell me why I read that book. So a book for pleasure gets PLE. An academic book that I'm reading as like a student myself is ACA. Something instructional that I'm reading specifically for the classes I teach is INS. And then obviously REF is a specific reference for something I'm writing. So that way, when I have a big pile of cards that maybe I've pulled for a chapter that I'm writing, or I've pulled for something I'm teaching, I know just by looking at these codes what that is used for. So it just helps me identify things quickly. So then the next field, if you will, in my address is the date that I began the reading, because it's important for me to place a reading historically so I have an idea of where I was when I was reading it. For example, I took all of the notes from when I was in college, or just after college, I guess, when I was reading David Foster Wallace's Infinite Jest, and I converted those into note cards. And it was important to me to know that I was reading that I think it was around 2019, because that places my thinking, my attitudes, etc. in time, and that helps me when I go back and look at the notes again. So then we get to my bib cards. So the one that I'm sharing, if I can get it on screen. I hope you can see that. It's from The Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. So you've got your normal author's name, title, publication, and then I make a note about other options for filing. And I just made a note that I filed this under 6530 under crime and mystery. But I also make a note that someone else might file this under a very relevant sister, which could either be horror, it could be straight out mystery. I mean, it could go multiple places, but I chose crime and mystery because that makes the most sense to me. After I read the book, I went back and I did my little summary so that I remember just the main kind of gist of the book, almost like a book blurb that I wrote. So I tell myself that the main character, Galaxy, goes by Alex Stern, sees ghosts. They're called Greys. She sees them from a young age. So the main story is she gets recruited by Yale University to be part of what's called the Ninth House. It's the ninth secret society house that governs the activities of the other eight and makes sure that the magics that they're messing with don't get unleashed in the world. So that's just a little reminder of myself of what the plot is. So as I flip over this first little bib card, you'll see up at the top, there's an H for hook, II, inciting incident, first plot point,
Yeah.
1B is first battle, M is midpoint, often referred to as the second plot point. 2B is my second battle, 3 PP, third plot point, third battle, and then the rebirth. So I wasn't doing this in real time as I read the book, but I listed my points out because I knew it would probably follow a roughly 8-point plot structure. You know, I know Bardugo's work well enough to know she probably did that, so it was a safe metric. If I didn't know that, I may have just divided it into acts 1, 2, 3, and 4, or maybe 1, 2, 3, like beginning, middle, and end point. And then just filled in those high level things as I finished the read through, because that's just going to be a shorthand way of guiding me through the plot. So in this one, I went back, and by the time I got to the midpoint, I could identify all of the plot points that came up to that. So I went ahead and filled those in. And then when I finished it in retrospection, I kind of went back through and thought it through and then was able to plug in the remaining ones. These are my perceptions of it. I could probably sit down over coffee with Leigh Bardugo and she would argue with me, not the midpoint. But, you know, I'm reading it, so I get to decide. Now, on the second card, the other piece that's relevant is, rather than plot points, which is how I did it on the back of the main bib card, I went through the way that I identify characters and key people. So I've got MC, which is my main character. I've got parents because her mom does figure as a minor figure. I've got a love interest. At the time I wrote it, I put Darlington, which his name is Daniel Arlington, but he goes by Darlington. And I put a question mark because we still don't know what's going on between them. I've got best friend is a girl named Dawes, but it could be Darlington, still don't know. Sidekick is certainly Dawes and later Turner, and they comprise a note that I've labeled the Scooby Gang because they all kind of pull together to solve this overarching mystery. Then we've got her boss, which is Dean Sando of the college, and I've made a note that the antagonist, my first thought was Michelle, but then these Greys, these ghosts that find her whose energy she can manipulate, become either minor antagonists or antagonists by proxy. So that was important for me to make a note there. So those two cards comprise my true to the standard bib card. And then the final piece is my address, which are the things that I broke down in the beginning. So this one is numbered 6530. The /3 indicates this is the third of Bardugo's books that I've read. That's just something I like to know. The ref.zkfxn, that tells me that I read it for reference and that it was in reference to my own Zettelkasten for fiction book, because I use this as an example. I date it. I started reading it on August 15th of 24. And then bardugo.nh tells me the author's last name, and NH represents the title. So the last card I have is I'm sharing my inciting incident card, because once I lined those out on my bib card, then I went through and I broke each one down and kind of wrote notes to myself about it. So for inciting incident, there is an apartment explosion. She basically kills everyone around her. And she wakes up in a hospital tied to the bed, not having any idea what happened. So that's one hell of an inciting incident, if I do say so myself. So in this state of waking up restrained to the bed, this man from Yale comes in and speaks with her and basically says, look, you've destroyed your life and blown up everyone you love. You really have no other place to go from here. So how about you come and work at a secret society for Yale University? And she's like, what the heck else am I going to do? Let's go. So that is basically the inciting incident. So now let me switch back to my other camera here.
Okay, am I back?
Yes.
Okay, so that is a snapshot of what that whole process looks like, which is how I break it down in the book. I have an entire chapter on Zettelkasten for reading fiction, and this is how I did it. So I hope that's helpful. I tried to not overcomplicate it, but I had to have a toe in each world, because on the one hand, I was doing it as a reader, but on the other hand, I was doing it as research because I had to be able to break it down and explain it. So it's probably way more in depth than your average leisure reader would do. But if you really, I mean, there are people who do these ridiculously elaborate book reading journals that they spend months and months and months laying them out, and beautiful designs, like the most beautiful scrapbook you could ever imagine. So I would think something like this would appeal big time to your book reading journalers, or just to someone that wants to go deeper into the material, and do, like Julianne, you called it, more of a an academic or a discerning reading of it. Yeah. But I would always say that comes after the first read through for pleasure, because I think Mel's right. You have to experience the work first, and then you can start thinking about it and taking it apart.
So, I mean, that makes total sense. And part of it is that you have to experience the full passage of time of reading the book, and how that maps into the time of the story. You've got two different aspects of time going there. And if you're interrupting them, then that is obviously interrupting the flow of the time. And the kinds of questions that you have is like, well, what is it that makes this story worth 500 pages? Why, why is it a multi-volume work? Why is it a short story? That's just you can't really know that until you've seen the whole thing to see how it has flowered.
Yeah, I totally agree. Now, as a simple treatment, like I said, you could just use your basic, Freytag's triangle and say, okay, here's where we started. Here's roughly how we got there, and this is kind of the climax. And then here's the result of that. I mean, that could literally be all that you're interested in capturing. And then maybe you want to dive a little deeper into your favorite character because you finished the book and you just don't want to leave them, so you go back. It really is governed by what the reader is driven by.
Now, do you put any in these cards that you make, do you capture ways that you think, I might have done it this way instead of that way? I think it might have worked
I
better.
argue with
Way.
authors all the time. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And usually for me, it's a reflection on how they did something, my speculation about why, and is that a tool that I want to put in my own toolkit or maybe repurpose in some way? But yes, I would argue that authors generally are accidental thieves, because I think we're always looking for things that light us up, that are different, or you take the familiar and make it strange or whatever. And then, that was so well done and I love that so much. I want to share that with my readers. Now, how can I put my own spin on it and make it happen? I think we naturally do that because you want to share the things you love. But then when it goes south, I'm the first one to, you know me, I'm a mangler and terrible writer in of books. So yeah, I'll highlight something or make a note in the margin and say, really, that was cheating, or, most authors would probably be offended by the things I write in their books, but I'm just being honest. But it's a conversation with myself, not with them.
Probably depends on the genre too, because there are certain genres where you like, sometimes I like this genre and sometimes I don't. Like horror is like that for me. I've some horrors like, okay, I was able to stay all the way through that, and that was gripping and wonderful. And then there's another one that's like, okay, too sadistic. I'm done. I'm out of here.
That was Bardugo for me. I mean, her other series of books was it was classified young adult, but it's a great read. Don't get me wrong. They turned it in, I think, to an Amazon series or something. But good stuff. This set, which Ninth House is the first one, and there's a sequel, Hellbent. There was territory in Ninth House where I was like, what are we doing now? So then I went and watched some interviews with her just to get my footing. This book came like 10 years, I think, after her young adult series. So she's a different writer. And after I saw some of her interviews and she was like, oh, this is so not young adult. This is adult. And I'm like, okay, I wish I would have known that going in. So you're not reading and you're like, what just happened? And then you're like throwing the book and yelling. And I did not need to see that, but, and then you're like, okay, maybe I'll just a few more pages, which for me, that's the hallmark of a great author. Even when you're like, I am going to throw up. It's like, dang, I got to know what happens, So I did go ahead and read Hellbent, which wasn't nearly as, I kind of knew what to expect and I could kind of skim over the stuff that like, I didn't want to go in there, but the way she ends Ninth House is, it's a really great quote. I think it's something like, so are we ready to go to hell now? I mean, it's just, and you're like, wait, what's happening? But once you're in it, I think if the author does their job, they've got you and you just go. But yeah, there's stuff that I'm really careful. I mean, after I finished Ninth House, like I had trouble sleeping. It was bad.
Right. That's why I don't do horror.
Creepy.
Oh,
Yeah,
I don't do
creepy.
it at all because I dream it. It comes back to me and I'm
Yeah, not good.
No, I just leave that genre alone.
Agreed.
Yeah. I maybe miss some good stuff, but I'll just have to miss it because there are too many bumps for me on the road, Yeah.
You can read the summary in the book group.
I can read what?
Read the summary in the book group. And then, it was a great story. Cool. Move on.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, maybe. I'm going to say even a maybe to that because
right.
Sometimes my imagination is just so active and it just makes these vivid pictures and And one of the things that Anthony Mativier talks about is, when you're doing, you're creating images from memory, the more, vivid they are. And he defines vivid as, horrible, sexy, or something like that. Something, and massive, whatever that is. So I just don't want to, have things chasing me,
I get that in my nightmares anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I thank you for that though, Victoria. That's
Yeah.
that was eye-opening, and I'll go back and I'll listen to this episode, watch it again myself to capture that, so that I can actually use it, in what I'm trying to do. So that's good.
Cool.
Yeah.
Victoria, in your book, you are talking about different kinds of narrative structure. Do you have for each of them an example?
Yes.
Awesome.
It was the best way for me to make sense of it in my own head, because I was looking at so many different kinds. I really needed to make sense of it with an example so that I could pick and choose which ones I wanted to include, because I read a lot more than I will actually include. So yeah, I had to have something to hang that theory onto in practice. So yeah, I do include, some are very well known, some not so much, but I try to include at least something that gives you a breadcrumb trail for what does this look like in practice.
Yeah, that's going to be super helpful because, if I were to try to take that same step that you did with other books that don't follow the 8 plot structure, right? 8 plot point structure, where do I even go? Right. So I think that your book is going to give readers, even though it's for writers, it's going to give readers who want to read in this deeper way, who are curious about how do it do what it do? A little more vocabulary. So that aspect of the storytelling is more of a second skin for us too.
Yeah, that's my hope. That's my hope. This allows you to lift up the hood and look around in there for whatever kind of story it is. And it's really fascinating how many different formulas there are. I mean, one of them starts at the end and writes the story backwards. Another one is a series of static try-fail, but I cast that in different lights so that you can consider it from different angles. But for me, that's probably the most fascinating part of the book, is that center section on story structure, because it's really eye-opening, all of the things that you can do. And then I introduce something I call VITZ, V-I-T-Z, which is variations in the Zettelkasten. So you've got an 8-point plot structure, you've got your kind of heading, but what if where they say you're supposed to pull out the rug, what if that doesn't fit? Your characters aren't behaving, your plot is going in a different direction. Well, you VITZ, you introduce a variation, and instead of pull out the rug, maybe they meet a mentor. And now you've changed that structure to suit your story. That's my goal, is giving the writer or the reader who wants to discern a way to understand. As the writer, you can change it however you need to. And as the reader, be aware that writers go off the rails, and you might be looking at something and going, wait, I thought this was a straightforward thriller and I've got this side thing going on. Well, hopefully learning a little bit about the structure helps you navigate that, and it makes reading more fun.
Well, I love it because you're giving us a vocabulary.
Yeah.
A vocabulary, so we can look at something and say, I know what that is. And you know where to place it. That's what a gift. Thank you so much. I'm really, I can't tell you. Yeah.
I'm writing as fast as I can.
Okay.
And that in the combination with Kathleen's deep analysis of character,
Mhm.
it's like well, yes, these are the places where things happen, but what happens internally and what drives it internally. We're
Yeah.
gonna
Yeah.
a year from now, we deserve PhDs.
That's right. Well, I guarantee you'll probably know more than your average MFA student, no question.
I would
Because
think
they
so.
don't teach anything other than the 3-act structure or the 8 plot point structure. That, I mean, that's it. You come out and that is story. But we've been so hypnotized to only see the standard Western conflict driven narrative that that's just how we experience story. And there's so much more, which is why this is so fun. There's so much more.
Well, wonderful. We don't have time for the second part of this where we were going to be sharing some cards about story. And I've suspected that this whole vein of Zettelkasten plus fiction reading is going to be more than just a one and done. So we will come back to this. And those of us who would like to have more cards to share might have more cards to share, having learned from this.
Yeah.
Right. So people who want to get in on this book club discussion that we're having with the Outsiders and the Starless Sea, as this is just the beginning of that, go to lilypub.org, sign up. It's not expensive, and it's a wonderful community of so many more people than just, yeah, there you go. Very nice. So many more people than here. We've mentioned a few names here, but each week we get more and more people who are joining and joining in, which is the best part of it. So hope to see new faces there in the coming weeks. And thanks for following the Zettelcast. All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I even wore my Zettelkasten shirt. Woo!
Oh, look at you.
Hey, and yours
Established.
didn't come backward. We can read it.
Yeah. We need
Cool.
we need that to be able to sell that in the merch.
I totally could.
And lilypub.org as well.
Yeah,
For that. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'll be our
With
next piece of
Kathleen's
merch. I can do it.
little drawing of the little Lilliputian.
Yeah.
Yes.
Cool.
All right, friends.
Well, thank you guys.
Yeah.
Okay.
See ya. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.